Hello everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more meaningful stories.
The sun hung low in the sky, its fiery glow fading behind the jagged, crumbling rooftops of the Detroit projects, leaving behind only a haunting, copper-colored hue that stained the clouds. Marcus sat on the front steps of his building, motionless, a wrench still gripped tightly in his hand. His overalls were drenched from the brief drizzle earlier, now streaked with grease and oil that had seeped into his skin. At just 23, Marcus carried a weight that most men twice his age would buckle under. The loss of his mother when he was only 10 had carved a permanent wound in his heart, while his younger sister had been sent to foster care. His father, once a proud man, had vanished into the streets, leaving nothing behind but a memory clouded in neglect. The only thing that remained was the constant ache of poverty and the unrelenting fight to survive. He worked long, grueling hours at a rundown auto garage, where the only thing he could count on was the grumpy old man who ran it, paying him in cash and expired snacks. His dreams of finishing community college had withered away, crushed by the weight of bills, hunger, and the streets that never let go. His days blurred into endless nights, and those nights swallowed him whole, leaving nothing but silence and disappointment. Hope? It was a rare visitor, fleeting and distant. That was until tonight, when a strange letter appeared, slipped quietly beneath the door of his apartment. It wasn't a text or a call, but a handwritten envelope, something that seemed so out of place in the digital age. The name on the envelope was written in flowing cursive, Mrs. Evelyn Harrington. He'd never heard of her. Inside, there was only a short note. Marcus, I need to speak with you urgently. Minerva's Cafe, 6:30 p.m. Don't be late. Marcus hesitated, the weight of the envelope in his hand heavy with mystery. He could easily dismiss it as another scam, but something about the handwriting felt too real, too personal. And honestly, what else did he have going on that night but reheating some noodles and scrolling through job rejections? So he decided to go. Minerva's Cafe was tucked away on the forgotten edge of the city, a quiet relic that most had long since forgotten. As Marcus stepped inside, the warm scent of brewed coffee and old wood greeted him like an embrace, the soft murmur of conversation, a stark contrast to the emptiness that lingered outside. The place was dim, almost secretive, with a single flickering light above the counter casting long shadows across the checkered floors. It felt like stepping into another world, one that was faded, as if time itself had forgotten it. Marcus, dressed in his worn shirt and scruffy jeans, walked cautiously to a corner, his boots tapping quietly against the floor. His eyes scanned the room, unsure of what to expect. And then he saw her. At a small table by the window, sitting with an air of quiet authority, was a woman who looked like she belonged in a different era, an age of elegance that seemed out of place in this dingy cafe. Her silver hair was pulled back into a perfect bun, her skin pale and smooth like marble, but it was the edges of her eyes that caught Marcus's attention. The lines there told stories. Years of experience, of life lived with purpose and resolve. She wore a pristine ivory trench coat, a black silk scarf draped across her neck with effortless grace. Every movement was deliberate, controlled. Marcus, she said softly, her voice smooth but sharp, as if she had been expecting him all along. Her eyes met his, unflinching, with a gaze as cold and calculating as glass. You came. That's good. Marcus hesitated at the table, suddenly feeling out of place, unsure of what was happening. He stood still for a moment before sitting down, his skepticism thick in the air. Who are you? How do you know my name? He asked, his voice a little rougher than intended. The woman's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. Let's just say I know more about you than you think, she replied, her eyes never leaving his. I've done my research. You're talented, underpaid, and stuck in a cycle you didn't create. But I also know you're loyal and desperate. Her words lingered in the air, heavy and unsettling, and Marcus couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. Marcus sat across from her, his mind racing, unsure whether he was caught in a dream or something much darker. The soft hum of the cafe felt distant, muffled, as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, eyes darting to the faint outline of the door, wondering if it would be better to walk away, to forget this strange encounter altogether. But the woman, Mrs. Evelyn Harrington seemed unfazed by his unease. She sipped her tea with the same calm precision, her fingers delicate around the porcelain cup as if she had all the time in the world. She wasn't a woman who rushed, not in her presence, not with her words. Marcus, she continued, her voice smooth but laced with something unreadable, I know your life, your struggles. I know you're drowning in debt, trapped by circumstances you didn't choose, but I'm offering you a way out, a chance for freedom. He frowned, the words echoing in his head. Freedom? What did she mean? His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her face. There was something about her calmness that unsettled him. She wasn't some rich person playing games. There was a purpose in her eyes, something hidden beneath the surface, just out of reach. Okay, he said finally, his voice hoarse. So what do you want from me? Her lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't one of warmth. It was knowing, confident. I want you to marry me. The words hit him like a slap, leaving him speechless for a long moment. He blinked, trying to process what she had said. I'm sorry, what? I want you to marry me, legally. It will be a real marriage on paper. No romance, no intimacy, just a partnership, an arrangement, she said, her tone steady, unwavering. In exchange, I'll pay off your debts, secure your future, give you stability, no strings attached, just companionship and appearances. Marcus stared at her, disbelief flooding through him. Why would I marry you? You're old enough to be my grandmother, he muttered, almost laughing. She didn't flinch. Because I'm offering you something no one else can. I'm offering you a future, Marcus, a life beyond this. Don't you want that? He studied her for a long moment, his mind reeling. It sounded absurd, ridiculous. But the weight of his situation pressed down on him, suffocating, and he realized he didn't have a choice. What's the catch? He asked quietly. There's always a catch, she said, her smile never wavering. But not one you'll see yet. Just say yes, marry me, and you'll have everything you've ever wanted. Marcus sat back in his chair, the weight of her words pressing down on him like a thick fog. His chest tightened as his mind raced, spinning with questions he couldn't answer. This woman, this stranger, she was offering him a way out, a lifeline that could pull him from the suffocating grip of his struggles. But the price seemed too high. He looked at her, his thoughts scattered like shattered glass. She hadn't flinched when he questioned her, hadn't backed down when he called her old enough to be his grandmother. Instead, she sat there, composed and sure, as if she knew something he didn't, as if she had already won. And part of him wanted to walk away, just stand up and leave this surreal encounter behind, return to the familiar grind of his life. But another part of him was desperate. His debts were mounting, his rent was overdue. His sister, the one thing left in his life that still mattered, was stuck in a system that didn't care. And here she was, offering him a way to fix it all, a way to get everything he'd ever dreamed of, freedom, stability, a future. No more struggling, no more grinding. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. So what's the catch? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, though he already knew the answer. Her smile was slow, deliberate, like she was savoring the moment. There's always a catch, she said softly, her eyes locking onto his. But not one you'll see yet, not until it's too late. His heart raced. This wasn't just a business deal, it was a trap, a game with stakes higher than anything he had ever imagined. But what else did he have? The streets? The garage? The endless cycle of failure? I'll do it, he said, before his mind could stop him. I'll marry you. The words left his lips, heavy with the gravity of what he had just agreed to. And as soon as they did, something inside him shattered, the last piece of hope he had left slipping away. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. His mind raced, replaying the conversation with Evelyn over and over again, as if trying to convince himself that he hadn't just made the biggest mistake of his life. But no matter how many times he went over it, the decision was already made. He had said yes, and now there was no turning back. Every corner of his small apartment seemed to close in on him as he lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, the faint hum of the city outside his window offering no comfort. He tried to tell himself it was just a business deal, just a way to fix everything that had gone wrong. But even as he tried to convince himself, something deep in his gut twisted uncomfortably. The next morning came too quickly, the daylight creeping through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. Marcus got up, dressed in his best clothes, which didn't amount to much, a pair of wrinkled jeans and a faded shirt. It felt wrong, like he was wearing someone else's life. He looked in the mirror, barely recognizing the man who stared back at him. Was this really who he had become? Someone who would do anything, anything, to escape the suffocating grip of his past? A black car arrived to pick him up later that day. The driver, a man in a suit who never spoke, didn't offer so much as a glance in his direction. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the low hum of the engine as they drove through the streets, past the familiar, broken buildings of Detroit. The city he had always known slowly slipped away behind him, swallowed by the smooth pavement that led them farther and farther from everything he had ever known. As they drove, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was heading into something far darker than he had anticipated. The mansion that awaited him was not just a house, it was a fortress, an imposing structure that seemed to loom over him, as if daring him to turn around and run. But he didn't. He couldn't. Because behind that imposing gate, behind those high stone walls, lay the promise of something he had only ever dreamed of. A future. Stability. Peace. Or so he thought. The black iron gates swung open slowly, groaning as if they hadn't been touched in years. Marcus's heart raced as he watched the city he'd known his entire life vanish in the rearview mirror. The car crept forward, the sound of the tires crunching on the gravel road sharp in the still air. The mansion that loomed before him was nothing like the run-down buildings he was used to. This wasn't just a house. It was a world unto itself, an opulent, silent kingdom that seemed untouched by time. Red brick walls rose up in front of him, adorned with white stone pillars that towered like ancient sentinels guarding a forgotten empire. Ivy snaked up the sides, wrapping the building in a green embrace, and the windows gleamed like secrets, reflecting the pale sky above. It was as if he had stepped into a story that belonged to someone else, someone with power and privilege beyond his understanding. As the car pulled up to the entrance, Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The place was beautiful and terrifying. The estate was enormous, stretching as far as the eye could see, each corner more imposing than the last. He stepped out of the car, and the driver didn't say a word, just opened the door to the mansion and motioned for Marcus to follow. Every step felt heavy, as though the ground beneath him was shifting, urging him to stop, to turn back. But he didn't. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and something older, something that lingered like dust on forgotten books. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes following Marcus as he walked deeper into the grand entryway. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of his footsteps echoing through the massive hall. There were no voices, no chatter, just the hollow, almost suffocating quiet of a house that had long since forgotten how to be a home. "Welcome," Evelyn's voice rang out, smooth and cold, cutting through the silence like a blade. She stood at the top of a grand staircase, her eyes watching him with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "This is where your new life begins." But as Marcus stepped further into the mansion, a gnawing feeling spread through him, as if he had just walked into a trap he couldn't escape. The wedding was a quiet affair, a private ceremony held in the expansive garden of the Harrington mansion. There were no guests, no friends, no family, just Evelyn, Marcus, a lawyer, and two witnesses who barely seemed alive, their faces expressionless as if they had been paid to be there, to sign and remain silent. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of blooming roses that seemed to mock the strange emptiness of the moment. The sky above was a soft shade of blue, but the clouds hung low, as though the heavens themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something, waiting for him to realize the enormity of what he was doing. Evelyn stood across from him, elegant as always, her emerald gown flowing like liquid silk around her. She looked every bit the part of the woman he had agreed to marry, her beauty timeless, her presence commanding. Marcus, in contrast, was a mere shadow beside her, dressed in a black suit that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, tailored to fit him as if it had always belonged to him. His hands were cold as he signed the papers, and when the camera flashed to take their picture, his smile felt foreign on his lips, as though it didn't belong to him. It was over quickly, too quickly. The lawyer handed him the pen, and Marcus signed away his freedom with a simple stroke of ink. A photograph was taken, capturing a moment that felt like a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Evelyn raised her glass of wine and smiled. Her eyes gleamed, sharp and knowing, as if she had just won some quiet victory that only she understood. "To freedom," she said, her voice ringing through the stillness of the garden, "and to shadows." Marcus didn't know what to say. The words didn't feel like a toast but a warning, a declaration of something dark and inevitable. He raised his glass with her, the wine burning in his throat, but even as he drank, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was not just a marriage. This was a contract, a bond that would change everything, if not for him, then for someone else. He didn't know what he had just walked into, but as the glass emptied and the evening drew on, he realized there was no turning back now. He was trapped, bound by a choice he hadn't fully understood. The mansion was vast, too vast, and Marcus quickly learned that the rooms felt more like prison cells than places of comfort. He wandered the endless halls, his footsteps muffled by the plush carpets, yet the silence echoed in his mind like a warning bell. The servants, though polite, treated him with a distant indifference, their eyes never meeting his, as though they knew more than they let on. Ivan, the chef, never smiled. Darius, the housekeeper, limped through the halls with a quiet sorrow, his gaze always downcast. Mitchell, the driver, barely blinked as he went about his tasks, as if he were nothing more than a shadow moving through the house. The atmosphere was heavy, stifling, the weight of secrets pressing in from every direction. Evelyn remained as elusive as ever, her presence at dinner fleeting, her conversation sparse. The distance between them grew with each passing day, and Marcus found himself more isolated than ever. She spent most of her time in the East Wing, in a room he had never seen, and though she occasionally invited him to join her for dinner, there was something unsettling about the quiet meals they shared. They ate together, but rarely spoke. The air around them seemed charged with unspoken words, the silence stretching long between each bite of food. At night, when the house seemed to settle into an even deeper quiet, Marcus would sometimes hear the faint hum of music, the slow, mournful strains of jazz echoing through the halls. It was as though someone was dancing alone in the dark, their movements graceful but haunted, as if trying to remember a forgotten time. The music seeped into his dreams, twisting his thoughts, leaving him restless and uneasy. And then there were the strange sounds. At first, he thought it was just the house settling, the creaks and groans of an old building. But one night as he lay in bed, he heard footsteps outside his door, slow, deliberate. He opened the door cautiously, but there was nothing, just the lingering scent of cigar smoke in the air, thick and unfamiliar. Evelyn didn't smoke, neither did the staff. The mystery only deepened, and as each day passed, the mansion seemed less like a home and more like a living thing, alive with secrets that Marcus wasn't meant to uncover. On the sixth night, the quiet of the mansion felt different. Marcus couldn't shake the restless feeling that had been gnawing at him for days, a gnawing that grew louder with every hour spent under its roof. The silence had become too heavy, too suffocating. It pressed in on him from all sides, its weight pushing down on his chest until he could barely breathe. The house was watching him. He was sure of it. That night, after dinner, he decided he couldn't take it anymore. The strange happenings, the whispers in the walls, the elusive Evelyn, it all felt like a slow, tightening noose. He needed to know what was really going on, needed to understand what kind of place he had stumbled into. It was well past midnight when he crept through the hallways, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat louder than the last, and his skin prickled with a mix of fear and curiosity. He wasn't sure why, but his feet led him toward the east wing, toward the door that Evelyn had told him never to enter, the velvet room. The air grew colder as he neared the door. The mansion seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew what he was about to do. The door was a deep crimson, carved with swirling, intricate patterns that seemed to shift under his gaze. There was no lock, no barrier to stop him. He reached for the handle, his hand trembling slightly, and pushed the door open. The room inside was dimly lit, the soft glow of a chandelier casting deep shadows on the walls. Velvet curtains hung heavy, draped around the room like mourning shrouds. In the center of the room was an altar, strange, dark, and out of place in a home like this. On it were photographs, some of them old, some of them recent, all of them unsettling. They were of him, Marcus. Photos of him at the garage, walking down the street, sitting on his porch. Dozens of them. The blood drained from his face as his stomach twisted with dread. Then he saw it, a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age, resting on the altar. With trembling hands, he reached for it, flipping it open to the second page. His heart stopped when he saw it. There, sketched in dark ink, was a boy who looked exactly like him. Same eyes, same face. The page read, Subject 27, Bloodline Extension Candidate acquired. Monitor for traits. Prepare for activation. The book slammed shut in his hands, but the words, the truth, had already begun to sink in. Marcus's breath caught in his throat as the book slipped from his hands, hitting the stone floor with a muffled thud. The room seemed to close in on him, the shadows pressing forward, curling around him like tendrils. The photographs of him, his life, his every move, stared back at him from the altar. Each image a chilling reminder that he was being watched, controlled. He spun around, his pulse racing, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of the room. And then he heard it, a voice, soft but unmistakable, whispering from the doorway. You weren't supposed to see that. Marcus turned to find Evelyn standing in the threshold, her figure framed by the dim light, her eyes dark and cold. She was no longer the elegant woman he had married. There was something different about her now, something fierce, something terrifying. Her presence seemed to fill the room, making it smaller, tighter. You've been chosen, Marcus, she said, her voice steady, almost too calm. You don't understand what this marriage means. Not yet, but you will. He took a step back, his heart hammering against his chest. You lied to me. This wasn't about helping me. This is something else. Her lips curled into a faint, knowing smile, but there was no warmth in it. Of course it is, she said, stepping further into the room. Everything has a price, Marcus. You are the price. His mind raced, the truth crashing down on him like a wave. The bloodline, the photographs, the book. It wasn't just about a marriage or a future. It was about something far darker. You didn't tell me, he whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. You didn't tell me what I was signing up for. No, she replied, her eyes narrowing. You were never supposed to know. Not until it was too late. Before he could react, Evelyn stepped closer, her gaze locked on his with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. But now that you know, that she said softly, there's no turning back. You belong to us. You always have. As the words sank in, Marcus felt the walls of the mansion closing in around him, the very air thick with the weight of his fate.